Let's talk about economic flow. Start a timer for 15 minutes.
Your timer is set for 15 minutes.
Very good. We have households and we have firms. Those are the two entities we want to talk about in this lesson to understand economic flow. Households represent all consumers. All consumers are the people that are buying goods, but also the people that are working. So basically the people. We took everybody in America, all the regular people, and we're just going to call them households. They represent all the workers, but also all the consumers or all the buyers. Firms, it's just a word we're going to use to describe all the businesses, every single business. Those are the people. Those are the industries that are making goods. So we're looking at the relationship between the people that buy and sell goods, but also, they're both buying and selling goods in a weird way. You might understand this here in a second, but they're both buying and selling. Well, no, they're not. They buy, they sell. Not necessarily. They're both buying and selling. But anyway, we're talking really about who's buying and who's producing goods. So let's look at this. Economic flow. So you're a part of households, and all households spend money. So that's basically what we're saying when we say consumer expenditure. You're a consumer, you consume, you buy goods. Expenditure is just a fancy word for saying what you buy. So what the consumers are spending their money on, and you spend your money on what firms, remember firms are all businesses, what you're spending money on. We buy stuff. And then in return, they sell us stuff. They sell us products. So consumer expenditure, fancy word for saying the money that the consumer or the people spend. And when you spend your money, you're buying a taco, you're buying a pair of shoes, you're buying a TV, you're buying a ticket to go watch a game. You're consuming a product. You give money, and the firm or all businesses give products to all households. All right, first step of the process. Now you might want to ask yourself a question. Well, where did the households get the money in the first place? Where did that money come from? I get it. They spend money. They have consumer expenditures, and they spend it, and they get products in return. But where did they get that money? And then, well, where did the firms get the products to start with? How did they even get something to sell? All right, let's play this out. So let's go back even a step, it's either going backwards or forwards. It depends on which way you want to look at it. But the firms or all businesses pay wages to households. So not only do households represent, we said this in the first slide, that households represent all consumers, all the stuff you buy, but it also represents you as all the people that are working. You work for a business more than likely. So you work for the firms, and in return, the firms give you wages, or they give dividends to investors. Mainly just focus on wages. They give money every hour or a salary to the workers. Why do they do that? Why does a firm pay you why are they just giving you money? They pay you to work. They pay us to work. They are paying you. They are buying your human resource. Remember when I said both of these groups are consumers and both of these entities are sellers. At first you thought, well, obviously the households consume. We buy stuff, and obviously the firms are the sellers. Not so fast, because when you look at it, you realize that, oh, wait a second. Now in this scenario, they're the consumer. They are consuming your resource, and you are selling the resource. They are consuming it. So you pay them money for a product. Oh, well, I'm a consumer. I spend my consumer expenditure, and I get those resources. I get the products. I am buying that from them. They are buying from you your human resource. They are paying you to build a house. They're paying you to mow their lawn. They're paying you to teach their children how to speak Spanish. They're paying you to operate open heart surgery. They're buying a service from you. They're buying a car from you. They're buying your labor. You are building the car. They are paying you to build the car for them. They take that car and then they sell it right back to you and you pay it. See the circular model here? We sell our human resources. This is called the circular flow model. We give them money, and then they give us the money right back. We buy stuff from them, and then they buy stuff from us. That stuff is human resource. So it's a little easier for us to understand because we buy a TV. Okay, I got a physical thing. A little trickier here because they're buying from you, your brain power in some cases. They may be paying you to write computer code. It's really hard to see. It's kind of abstract. It's not concrete. Or paying you to show up to work for 8 hours, and you might do a bunch of different stuff. It's a lot easier for us to understand households buying in the economic flow, a physical, tangible thing. But sometimes we buy a service, like we pay someone to teach us yoga, or we pay someone to be a cycling instructor. There isn't anything really tangible. We're paying for an experience. Like in this case, they are paying for sort of an experience, and that experience is you to come to work and do something for them and to help them create products that they sell back to us. So we see, like, give them human resource, and they use that human resource, they combine it, right? Remember, human, capital, and natural, they combine those three resources to create a product, and they sell that product right back to you. The money cycles around. This is a circular flow model. But what about government? Government always gets involved. This is social studies class. We've got to talk about government. Households pay taxes. Firms pay taxes. The initial reaction here, is that this is just sucking money out of the economy. Look at the system. It's beautiful. We don't need the government to get involved. Why is the government going to go mess up this perfect system? I buy from them, they pay me to work for them, and it just all goes perfect and swimmingly. Why does government got to get involved and mess with stuff? Well, we got to have governments, right? Governments at the basic level and our foundational level from the fundamental political principles in units 1, 2, it's that we have to create governments so that we can have an economy that is safe and secure and that people have rights. If we don't have a government creating a stable society, then this economy that you see on your screen, it doesn't exist. We won't have an economy that is fair and that doesn't pollute and where people follow the rules. We need a government to make sure that our nation can exist, and if our nation is safe, then markets will be created and markets will grow and create opportunities. But you cannot have strong markets with opportunities unless you have at least a basic level government that is protecting the rights of citizens and protecting their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You need a basic government. You don't need a big government, but you need some government. And to get that government running, we need tax dollars. And they get those tax dollars by taxing households and by taxing firms. So we get that we need it. But when you look at this, you feel like, well, if they take money out, then households will have less money. And if households spend less, then firms will have less. And if firms also are paying taxes, they'll have less. That means less they can pay in wages. If the firms or all businesses have less money, then they are going to spend less money on wages. That means less workers. And if there are less workers, that's less spending because people don't have jobs. And less spending means less products that they can buy. And if there's less demand for products, oh my God, we're tying everything together, right? If people have less money, because they lost their job, because the firms don't have money because they pay taxes, households have less money. And if households have less money, they buy less. The demand goes down. And if demand goes down, price goes down. And if price goes down, so see how the whole thing collapses? Oh, well, we'll just get rid of the government, get rid of taxes then. Not so fast, because actually the government doesn't just suck the money out of the economy. It doesn't go, the government doesn't just suck money out of the economy. Because that's what it looks like, right? They're just taking money out of the cycle, which is ultimately going to hurt the economy. No, that's not what happens. The government doesn't just take money out and then sit on it. It doesn't just take the money out of the economic circular flow model and bury it underground. The government takes the money and the government does what they are so good. Well, I don't want to say that they're good at this, but this is what they do. Well, let's not say that they're good or efficient, but they do it, and that's spend money. The government loves spending money. The government takes that money out of the economy. It blows it right back out into the economy, spits it out into the economy. A gazootite sneezes it back into the economy. They take the money from households, they take the money from the firms, and they spend it on schools, who then spend it on teachers. They spend it on police, which then spend it on police officers. And guess what teachers do too? They spend money. And guess what? Police officers actually, they buy, I'm not going to say they buy donuts. You want me to say that they buy donuts. They buy regular things. Stop using false stereotypes. They spend money just like us. They buy goods from firms. Teachers represent households. Police officers represent households. They are part of the circular flow, so they didn't pull the money out of the economy. Sure, it was kind of like a segue. They kind of pulled it out and went an alternative route, but the money went right back into the circular flow model. It was kind of an alternative bypass, but it got back into the economy, and there it is again. Firms and households. Sure, took the long way around. Tax dollars will eventually go back to the households. Taxes Government takes the money and then, for the most part, redirects it back into the households, and the households then spend the money on the firms, and so on the circular flow model goes. So, sure, it looks like the government sucks the money out of the economy, but they don't. They just kind of redirect it, and eventually it goes back in. So taxes aren't necessarily a terrible thing in this situation. Now, this could go all wrong if the government just spends the money poorly. So here we have a really good system because households are pretty wise about what they do with the money, and the firms are pretty wise about what they do with their money because it's their money. It's their money. It's their money. I have worked hard for this money. I'm going to try to use it the best way that I can. We're a business, and if we want to stay a business, we need to use the money in the most efficient, best way that we can. And so for the most part, the circular flow economic model goes pretty strong. And the taxes, in theory, shouldn't be a problem. The problem happens, going back to what I talked about before, it's not the government's money. They will behave differently. Households, think about it. You work all day for your money. You are desperate for your money. You need that money. And so you are trying to be as smart as possible with that money. And if you run a business, your business depends on you using your money efficiently and correctly, and you don't make any poor choices. The government is different. It is not the government's money. And the government will always have this money. If the government doesn't spend it wisely, then it don't matter. The government can spend it on whatever it wants. It is not directed by the market. The economy and basic laws of supply and demand do not really are not enforced by the government. We don't make the government. Unfortunately, we could blame ourselves for not making the government be fiscally responsible. Think about it. What's fiscally responsible? Fiscally is just a fancy word for saying money. You have to be responsible with your money or you'll lose your house, you'll lose everything that you own, you'll lose your car, you'll be homeless. If you are capricious or you spend money on whatever you want and you don't save, you will suffer. And if businesses act the same way and spend money that they don't have, then they will go out of business. We as individuals and households, and they as firms or all businesses, have to act fiscally responsible or we cannot function. We will pay the price. The economy will slap us down and we will have to deal with poor decisions. Unfortunately, our government spends whatever they want. Our government, look, think about yourself. If you're in debt, it's not a good thing. Thousands of dollars in debt, that's not a good thing. You know that your life is going to be ruined. Our government is $10 trillion in debt. Trillions and trillions. So not a million. Not a billion. Our government has trillions of dollars of debt. That means trillions of dollars worth of being fiscally irresponsible, spending money it doesn't have. Households and firms don't behave that way. And so the circular flow model works pretty well. And taxes, in theory, shouldn't mess with the economy. But it does when the government starts taking out money and spending it inefficiently and spending it incorrectly and spending it irresponsibly. This works well because you spend what you got. If you spend no more and spend no less, and people behave for the most part rationally. Government does not have to follow those rules. And we as Americans don't force the government to follow those rules. We as Americans have the opportunity to say, you can only spend so much money. And we can vote and we can elect politicians and we can elect our representative government to create laws and then enforce laws that say the government is absolutely not allowed to spend more than it has. It must stick to a budget. And there have been some times throughout American history where we have put our hand down, our foot down and said, we need you to do this. Today is not one of those days. Right now, over the last 10 years, our government has been incredibly irresponsible and has been allowed by ourselves. Now, there have been some people, the Tea Party and other Americans, who have stood up and said, you got to stop. You're going to drive us into the ground. If an American spends more money than that individual American has, he will go bankrupt and lose everything and suffer. And if the government keeps doing the same thing will happen to the government. And when the government goes down, it's going to take every single citizen with it. So circular flow works perfectly, and taxes do not hurt as long as the government is responsible with money and spends so efficiently and doesn't create a bunch of problems. Unfortunately, the government is not really making this system work too well.